because of the various means of empowering the captives, they had warriors, they had criminals, they had prominent people, people from all walks of life being captured and enslaved. And these persons sometimes walked for miles. They were walking from all the way from Timbuktu to Cape Coast, Kumasi and beyond to Cape Coast. These men did not know what awaited them because nobody who had been enslaved previously came back to tell them what was going to happen. They did not know what was going to happen. All they knew was that they had been enslaved. They got here and they resisted. However, all the male captives that resisted had a punishment. That punishment was death. Death by starvation and suffocation. So once a male captive resisted or fought for his freedom, he would be brought in there to the male condemned cell. And over there, the captives were left. They had 3 doors shut on them. This door in here, there were 2 others in there. The men were left deprived of food, deprived of water. There was no ventilation in the condemned cell. So the men were taken in there alive and brought out dead because they tried fighting for their freedom. Now I want us to go to the condemned cell, if you can. Let's go in there. I'll close the door for a few seconds and then we come back out, but it's hot. So please watch your head. After you. Alright, so the condemned cell was worse than this. Remember, they had 3 doors. So the men were left here. This was the first door. There was one sharply after, and then the last door outside. Initially, this room was supposed to be a storage room where they would keep goods. But they made it a condemned cell, so they blocked the side so that it will be hot. Please watch your head. Male condemned cell. That was not all. The worst aspects of the conditions in there was that, for instance, if all of us were taken in there to be killed and some of us died, you know, it would be decent if the dead ones were separated from the living, right? That was not what happened in there. The last person had to die before all the bodies were brought out. So in addition to starving and suffocating, you have your dead brother beside you. So the last person amongst them died before all the bodies were brought out and dumped in the ocean. All right, so this door, this is the only original 17th century door that is left in the castle. All the other doors have been renovated. This is original. Right. Please come with me this way. Over here was a watch post or a watch point to the tunnel. Now this was not a point of entry or exit. Rather, when the male captives were walking through the tunnel to get to their ships, British officials would stand out here and supervise the movement of the captives. Starting from the male slave dungeon, the male captives would come out from this side. The female captives did not have a tunnel. So just as we entered, they came in through this door. And then, there was a door here. This was the initial door of no return. So both male and female captives exited from this door. But the sea was coming in from this side. It was flooding the place and disrupting activities. The British had to block this side and create a new door of no return. And again, both the entrance and the exit of the tunnel were blocked in 1833. Now the female captives, they were not killed, but their spirits were broken. So all the female captives that resisted were raped, brought in here. They had a door that was shut on them over here. These women were left in there for about 7 days. They were fed once a day through this hole. And they had a lavatory system over there. Now, after spending 7 days in here, that was not all. The British men still had them against their will, sometimes even under absurd conditions. So for instance, those are cannonballs. A female captive from here could be asked to hold 3 cannonballs at a time. And the condition would be that if even one of the cannonballs fell, it meant that the bearer or the one holding the cannonballs had consented to be raped. And these cannonballs were heavy. They fell all the time. And that was the order of the day. All right. So let's see the female slave dungeon this The female slave dungeon had 2 chambers. It was this chamber and then the other chamber. And each chamber held about 150, so about 250 enslaved African women. These women, just like the men, had to stay in here to wait for their ships under similar conditions. Female captives were taken to work and to increase the population over there, so that on the plantations, if a female captive gave birth, their children were automatically enslaved persons that could be bought and sold. Just like the men, these 3 holes were their only sources of light and ventilation. The window behind, this window was not bare. It had metal bars dividing it. And during the time of the slave trade, if any of the British men wanted to have any of the African women, he would stand outside, look through, and then make his choice so that he could have her. We are going to see the infamous door of no return outside. All right, so this is the door of no return. This is the door that separated many of our ancestors from their homeland. This is where many began their journey to the African diaspora. From here, captives were taken on ships. They were taken to places like USA, Jamaica, Barbados, the Bahamas, to other British colonies to work on plantations and some in mines. And from here, all the captives lost their identities. All the African names that they bore were taken away from them. They were replaced with Christian names and their masters' surnames. People from the same region or the same place were not put together. They mixed these people up so that they could not speak one language in order to curb rebellion. And the captives worked all year round, tirelessly under brutal conditions, from dawn till dusk. All the captives that went through the door of no return, as the name depicted, could not come back. We here would walk through the door of no return, except that we will come back in a few minutes' time. Please come with me. The captives used the door of no return. The British used these staircases in and out the castle. And during the time of the slave trade, the sea was right below the staircase, right over there. And then the ships that took the captives could not bear here. So they had smaller boats that would come here, take the captives to the bigger ships, about 10 minutes away. And the journey from here across the Atlantic Ocean was called the Middle Passage. Now on the ships also, the misery of the captives continued. They were packed tightly together facing horrifying conditions. And some of them believed that when they died, their souls would come back home. They tried committing suicide. And when we look back, we have a door of intent. This door was taken in 1998 during the first emancipation celebration in Ghana. And in order to celebrate that, two mortal remains, two skeletons of descendants of enslaved people were exhumed from their burials and brought to Ghana. So one of them was a woman from Jamaica called Crystal. The other was a man from New York called Samuel Carson. The bodies were flown to Accra, Ghana. You know Fort Amsterdam. There is a fishing community, yes, Abanzi, between Accra and Cape Coast. The bodies were brought on road to that community, and from there they were brought on sea, so that they would use the same Atlantic Ocean that their ancestors were taken on, pass through this door of return. In the castle, they organized a short funeral ceremony called the Great Confines for them. And afterwards, these bodies were reburied at Asen Manso, where the captives had their last bath.
Alright, so now Mr. Raf is walking through the door of return to indicate that he has indeed returned to his ancestors, the motherland Ghana.
I have actually officially returned.
Okay.
This is for you, Akaba.
Oh.
Realize how cruel humans can be, and usually when we hear the story, we tend to blame one party or the other. Africans were the victims. However, there were a few African participants. There was European involvement in the slave trade. But we read a message over there from our chiefs. The chiefs were saying that all of us, humanity, have to make sure that we do not repeat yesterday's mistakes ever again. Thank you very much for your audience. Once again, I'm Felicia Bentisam. This is the end of our presentation.